My name is Tammy Martin.
And I'm John Martin.
And we are the founders of Young Black Leadership Alliance. YBLA is a nonprofit organization that focuses on building leaders in young Black men and women, starting in high school, through college, and into their young professional careers. We build leaders that will make a positive impact on their peers, communities, and eventually the world. First of all, as we get started, I want to thank our partners at DHG for starting the charge on this initiative to end racial injustice and inequality to the Black community. We thank their team for all of the support on making this a real reality.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So we're using the acronym STAND to describe this initiative. STAND is for seize the moment, talk to others, act on your biases, no more silence, and donate your resources. We invite you to stand with us to make a better tomorrow in the Charlotte community. We have taken a target goal of having 2,020 actions towards bridging the gap of racial disparities.
Yes.
Welcome to the 8th segment of YBLA Community Conversation. Today marks the second session of phase 2 as we take a deeper dive into racial disparities that have plagued the Black community. The first phase was focused on giving voice to educating others on the Black experience. Phase 2 will focus on the 7 racial disparities that have disproportionately affected the Black community. This phase is about learning from leaders that can make system-level changes. The panelists will inform us of the positive actions that have been done and the actions that are being developed.
Yes. Last time we discussed the employment disparity. We learned about the wage gap amongst Blacks. We learned about the lack of diversity at all levels and the low representation of Blacks at the executive level. We featured CEOs and executive level leaders to discuss this employment disparity. The panelists shared with us such actions as having courageous conversations in the workplace, creating safe environments where their associates can speak up about racial inequality, and being more intentional with hiring more diversity at top executive positions. Now, today, we're going to talk about housing. Yes. What is the first thing that pops in your mind when you think about housing? It's part of the American dream, as we all want. It's a place where we raise our families. It's where some of the warmest memories are kept. It's typically the first big purchase that we ever make. And of course, as the old saying goes in The Wizard of Oz, there is no place like home.
Absolutely. But what happens to the American dream when you find yourself limited due to the color of your skin? You're forced to pay higher taxes, higher interest rates on mortgages. You may live in higher areas of higher crime and the lowest performing schools. Even worse, sometimes you're forced to out of your home that has been in your family for generations. Yeah. So we're going to discuss racial disparities from 3 aspects today: lending, affordable housing, and Black home ownership. Now let's get started. So, Dion, would you please introduce yourself by giving your name, your title, company organization, how long you've been working in the housing industry, and give us one word that describes the housing disparity in Charlotte.
Sure. Good morning or good afternoon now, but thank you for allowing me to join you. I'm Dion Nelson. I'm president and CEO of Laurel Street Residential. Laurel Street is a mixed income housing developer based here in Charlotte. I founded the company 9 years ago in 2011 after having worked in the housing industry for several years. So my total housing experience is about 15 years now. I come from a less traditional housing developer background, meaning that my career prior to coming to Charlotte was really in financial services and management consulting. But I have been working in the affordable development industry now for more than a decade, and certainly have enjoyed that experience. I believe is what I was meant to do in the world. So that's I feel like I'm on path now. One word for the disparity of housing in Charlotte.
Yeah.
I would say extreme.
That's amazing. Thank you. Jamie, would you go next, please?
Hey, good afternoon, and very excited to be here today. My name is Jamie Hill. I am a mortgage loan officer with True Alliance Federal Credit Union, and I have been working with residential lending for 5 years with home equity and mortgage loans. My word of choice for the one word to properly describe the disparity in housing in Charlotte is apparent. That would be my word.
And you said a parent?
Yes, sir. I think sometimes as I was invited to join and knowing more on the lending side and the regulations on that end, when I was invited to join this panel, I did some research myself. And I think it's quite apparent, the numbers and the facts of the disparities and in minorities and housing. And I think that's something that needs to be addressed, and hopefully it's going to be more change implemented. I'm thinking on the lender's end with some policies and things that have been enacted and regulations to hopefully eliminate this as it has been identified. But we obviously have more change to go.
Yes.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, Aaron, would you follow up with that?
Sure. Thank you all for having me. My name is Erin Barbie, and I am the Senior Vice President of Programs and Fund Development at the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Housing Partnership. So we're an organization that helps people find housing solutions, and whether that be through building affordable housing or providing lending opportunities through down payment assistance or through financial empowerment education. We believe that all of those things encompass what is needed for affordable housing. I've been with the partnership for just over a year now. So my affordable housing career has specifically been within that year. But prior to that, I was working in senior housing and focused on ensuring that all seniors had a roof over their head in the last 13 years. So again, thank you so much for having me. Oh, my one word. So my one word for the housing disparity in Charlotte, I chose the word systemic.
Systemic. Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Laura, would you go next?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for inviting me to join the panel today. I'm Laura Belcher. I'm the president and CEO of Habitat for Humanity of the Charlotte region. I have been with Habitat for 6 years now. So spent some of my career in corporate and financial services and public accounting, and then transitioned into nonprofit. And to Dion's point, have found kind of that marriage now between my personal passions and my profession. And so in the place I'm supposed to be right now. From a one word on the housing disparity, I would say it's disconcerting, very unsettling.
Awesome. Thank you. And you, James Mitchell, if you would mind following up to that.
First of all, Tammy and John, thank you so much for allowing me to be part of the panel. I really appreciate it. And you have a great panelists. I think 3 of the 4, I know them very well. Total transparency, I'm on the board with the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Housing Partnership. I'm a big fan of Laura Street and Dion Nelson, and I support everything that Habitat sends to the City Council. Speaking of which, I've been in the Charlotte City Council now serving my 18th year, so thank you all so much for allowing me to serve the public. And if there's one word I could say about affordable housing, I would say it is a priority. My one word, priority.
Nice.
All right. Well, thank you for that. We are definitely looking forward to learning from our panelists today. All right, everyone, we're going to get started today, and we're going to start the discussion off by watching a video. Typically, we would ask you to watch a video after the segment as a call to action. But this video was so impactful that we wanted to complete a collective action together. So will you please give some attention to the short video that Eric is getting ready to roll on your screen, and it's going to provide some context for our conversation today.
Awesome.
Change is no good if it's not for the better. Some change ain't no good at all.
This is where we orchestrated in this community. And this was known as Brooklyn. This is where black folk lived. This is where the churches were. This is where our businesses were.
The neighborhood of Brooklyn, for then it was ideal, because every Everybody looked after everybody's children. Didn't nobody have nothing, but it was close. You could sleep on the front porch. You could walk, get up and go anywhere you want to go at any time of night. Didn't have no problems.
Charlotte's Brooklyn neighborhood existed for about the first 2/3 of the 20th century. It's the area that today is the government center, Marshall Park, NASCAR Hall of Fame, all of that in the center city. It was most of the Second Ward neighborhood. As segregation hardened, became the most important African American neighborhood. Brooklyn was the center of civic life. It was where the Black Main Street was, roughly where today's Martin Luther King Boulevard was. It was a beloved neighborhood.
We played hopscotch in the street and played ball in the street, kickball and softball. All that was played right over there. And when I close my eyes, I can see all of that.
We had dry cleaners. We had grocery stores. We had meat markets. We had shoe shine stands, barber shops. Brooklyn is a wonderful place to live. We used to make pallets on the front porch and never will forget.
You had poor people, you had middle class people, and maybe even a little more affluent people.
Congested streets, inadequate parking, retail vacancies. There's only one answer. That is a master plan of development. It's do or die for downtown Charlotte right now.
During a period of time, there was this urban renewal that came through, and I often heard it growing up as a child as being referred to as Black removal, because that's what I witnessed, that Black folk were actually displaced from the Brooklyn community, which was uptown Charlotte, and moved to the west side.
When they said they was gonna tear down Brooklyn, and they start putting up posters letting you know, and the next thing you know, we're shutting down everything. Time to go.
Was if you wipe out blighted neighborhoods, you'll have the perfect city. And unfortunately, they defined blighted neighborhoods as neighborhoods where there were a lot of absentee landlords, a lot of rundown housing, which often was African American neighborhoods because of redlining and other things that kept African Americans from easily buying homes.
The property was significant. People felt that Brooklyn was a shanty town, had all shotgun housing, it was blighted. Well, there was a part of Brooklyn that certainly had low-income housing or houses that wasn't very affordable. But guess what? It also had houses that had multi-bedrooms, wrought iron fences, really two-story homes. They were owned by African Americans. So there was a variety of price point housing in Brooklyn.
Okay. I feel like a stranger in my hometown. There's so much change. Because I can't even find my way now when I come down here. Let's see. On this side of the street, the Savoy would have been right in there, the Savoy Theater. I don't see anything here that remotely helps me to remember where anything is. None of this is. If that were 2nd Street, we would have made a left there, and about right in there, the Savoy Theater. And where all those gray buildings are would have been buildings, apartments. And on down there would have been Black businesses, cafes, tailor shops, hairdressers.
In the last few years, which will come to fruition as we move forward, is this Brooklyn Village project, which is intended to give honor to that history and to create something that won't look anything like the old Brooklyn, but we'll have some of the vibrance of having stores, homes, offices, all in the same place.
Dennis Lacaria, Senior Assistant to the County Manager, will be giving you an update on the Center City redevelopment project. It includes Brooklyn Village.
So going into the components of the master redevelopment agreement, 106,800 square feet of retail, 532,000 square feet of office, 395 housing units minimum. 30% of the below market units will be dedicated to 60% AMI or less.
You know, where there's still some emotion around the history of Brooklyn, I respect it, and I think it's foolish to try and, like I said, to try and do anything that like attempts to fix that. Is that specifically for the former residents of Brooklyn? It's not.
The county is saying we're going to rebuild Brooklyn. We can only replace those facilities, but the spirit is what I'm pushing for. That as we build, that we build on the spirit of Brooklyn, what it was.
Brooklyn to Blue Heaven, to First Ward, Third Ward, Billabille, Greenville. All these places is long forgotten about. Change is on the way.
Wow, what a super impactful video there. If you guys would just join us in the chat and just let us know what you thought about the video. Tammy and I, when we watched it, it was just so emotional to watch a whole community just be destroyed. I mean, literally, you see the bulldozers come through and actually physically move people out, and you see people sitting on their porch and just watching that. So I know the communities, and the interesting thing is in the video, there were people in the video that I saw that I knew, you know, so B, some of the other people, and we've been living here for 15, 16 years and never knew about the community. I mean, I heard about it, but some more details. And that's the long-term impact that are having on families. So
that's the one thing that we actually miss, is because they had that sense of community.
Yeah.
And that's what makes it so special, because especially in the Black culture, it was a village.
Right.
And that literally felt like the village.
That village is no longer there, which is huge. So just to get some background on redlining, so you guys will see a slide on the screen here that talks a little bit about redlining. It's really, really important to understand some history as we go into really this disparities in housing, because we're only going to be able to scratch the surface. It's amazing how deep this is. But if you look at redlining, just to give you some education, back in 1933, under the Franklin Roosevelt administration, there was an attempt to reduce foreclosures. And what they did is they actually created a system that discriminated against Black and Indigenous people. They created maps around the country, and on those maps, there was actually red areas. There was green areas, there were red areas, and yellow areas. And the red areas were really Black and brown neighborhoods. And the green areas were areas where they actually, white neighborhoods, where they invested, where people were giving loans into. So in Charlotte, the green areas, there was only a couple, Myers Park, Dilworth, Eastover, the southeast sector, the areas near the Charlotte Country Club in the northeast. So these are really areas where they saw as growing, prosperous areas where they can give loans to. Then when you start to look at the West and some of the other sides, they weren't investing in those areas. And that really had an impact on depressing the Black community in the housing market in those areas.
Yes, definitely, because even when we was doing research, even in 1968, when the Fair Housing Act, which was part of the Civil Rights Act, when they made it illegal to refuse to sell or rent a house to any person based on their color, even 20 years later, we saw that it still happened.
Yeah.
And one research that we read was in 1988, there were banks that was granting twice as many loans to low-income white people than what they were giving affluent Black people. So sadly, this discrimination continues to go on even today. You still hear those stories today about the discrimination when it comes to lending. Also, which is the reason why we wanted to have the conversation about the housing segregation that's going on in Charlotte. So to kick it off with our panelists, and Aaron, I will start with you. Based on the history of Brooklyn and the video that we saw, redlining, the housing segregation in Charlotte, how has this impacted the Black family?
So I'll start by saying that I watched the video for the first time today. I knew a lot about Brooklyn, but I hadn't seen that video. And to your point, it is very emotional.
Yeah.
I wrote down a couple of quotes that stood out to me. One from Daryl Gaston when he said, "Urban renewal equals Black removal."
Right.
And when you think about the psychological impact of that, where a whole group of people can physically be moved out of place that they call home, where they had infrastructure, where they had development, where they had family and churches, and just displaced to go anywhere, which happened to be West Charlotte. You can think about the generational impact that has. Personally, watching that video, it really put some pieces together for me. When I moved to West Charlotte and began interacting with the elders, things they kept saying was our history was erased in Charlotte. And as a younger generation person, I can't point back to Brooklyn and have direct memories. And so you begin to feel disenfranchised. You begin to feel a little bit hopeless as you pass on information from generation to generation. And so what this redlining did was created pockets of poverty within Charlotte. And I pulled up the redlining map that you were talking about and displayed, and it absolutely matches our crescent and wedge that we have here, right? It absolutely it mirrors low opportunity areas. It mirrors areas where you won't have economic mobility available to you. And so this impact of redlining, urban renewal, what happened in Brooklyn is going to go far beyond our own generation if we don't stop and start doing something now.
Absolutely. Laura, do you have anything to add to that as far as how this redlining has impacted?
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, Brooklyn is an example of a neighborhood that got displaced locally. When you think about the kind of the magnitude of the redlining impact, here in Charlotte and across the country, I think one of the key statistics that haunts me is that between 1934 and 1968, so in a 34-year period, only 2% of the mortgages underwritten in the country were for families of color, for Black families. 98% of the mortgages were for white families. And the redlining and the systemic activity that was done denied Black home ownership for decades. And that has a lasting impact today on generational wealth and the disparities between home ownership rates for families of color and white families, and then generational wealth between families that are white and Black families. So it has a compounding impact. So we can see it in Brooklyn in kind of that micro instance, and we can see it, across the entire community and the nation based on redlining and the impact that it has had cumulatively.
Right.
Can you give, that's amazing, because I'd never heard that.
That's staggering.
That stat. Can you say that one more time? Abuna, could you put that in the chat too, so we can get that in there?
Yeah, so there's a great book called The Color of Law if you want to read more about this, but it focuses a lot on the redlining impact, and but between 1934 and 1968, so in a 34-year history, 98% of the mortgages in the United States were underwritten for white families and only 2% for Black families.
Wow, that's staggering. That is absolutely staggering. James, in terms of from the city's perspective, I mean, obviously this is going on in our city. What types of things are you guys thinking about around Brooklyn, around what's happening, around redlining? Any things that you guys are working on at this point?
Well, so the county is taking total responsibility for Brooklyn Village, and they have awarded Don Peoples, a developer, to come in and redevelop Brooklyn Village. I would say, as a Charlotte native, even though I was young, I remember my parents and my grandparents having a discussion, and it created a lot of.
Oh, we lost you.
I apologize for that. I'm sorry. But it created a lot of racial tension in the community when that occurred. And some of which my family, most of my relatives stayed in Brooklyn. They actually moved off Beatty's-Ford Road. So Beatty's-Ford Road became the new area where those who stayed in Brooklyn relocated to. And so I think fast forward for us, I think the mayor came out and we apologized to the city. I think someone said it best today. This is a systemic type of system that has caused so much disparity. We have to own that. And I think now, Tammy, though, and John, I think the citizens are making us accountable. How do we move forward? How do we make sure gentrification doesn't occur anymore? How do we replace it? How do we have tools in place to not only deal with affordable housing? Because I would tell you, I think we are in there's two Charlottes right now. And I would say the city council, we make it a priority. It's the Charlotte that 100 new people are relocating a day, and they're buying most of the downtown. You see all the apartments going up downtown. And then you have the local Charlotteans who have been here for a long period of time and saying, how can I have upward mobility? Those were some of the challenges are. And so I give Mayor credit. We put $50 million affordable housing bond on the ballot. You, the voters, supported that. We're going to have another $50 million bond coming up this November. Dion and Aaron and Laura know these statistics a lot better than I do. But we are missing about 32,000. I want you to make sure we get this number right. 32,000 affordable units in our community. So until we address how we can at least identify and start building more affordable housing, I think Charlotte will not become the great city it can. And I would tell you, there's two narratives. One, it's NIMBY, not in my backyard. Citizens love to talk about affordable housing until they see that blue Z going near their community. Secondly, we don't have enough developers like Laura Street and Charlotte Mecklenburg Housing Partnership building affordable housing. The profit margins are small. So you don't do this to make money, but you do it because you believe in the city of Charlotte and you believe in our residents.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
Amazing.
There's a lot in there. Wow.
Right. Hey, Jamie, what's your impact on this? What do you think about, where we are as how the Black family has been impacted by redlining, and what have you seen on your end?
With my experience on the lending aspect, I, obviously I'm a little bit more well-rounded with the regulations and things over time that we've seen implemented. As you had mentioned, the Fair Housing Act back in 1968, followed up with another regulation from the ECOA for Equal Credit Opportunity Act that was implemented. I still think there's a lot of change to come, and things, as we've seen from 1968 forward, with the numbers and the statistics reporting behind minority home ownership in comparison to other home ownership groups, there is still some reform we need to identify. I think one of the most important things on the lending side as well to help prepare people is going to be the educational piece. I think that that can be very helpful on the lending side to have people prepared, planning, and educated on what steps are going to help to complete home ownership and get to that final finish line. The thing that breaks my heart the most in a lender's seat to see for helping people that are desiring home ownership is the cost difference as well. And I explained to a lot of home buyers that are looking into purchasing a home, the cost of rent in comparison to purchasing a home itself, not only having the asset and acquiring that wealth and to move on to your family and pass along, but you wouldn't believe in comparison the same property to rent to actually purchase and how much people can save monthly. So I think that homeownership, for so many reasons desired, is, you know, something we all dream to obtain, we want to obtain, but it's being prepared, educated, and knowing what it takes to get there, and making sure you have some foundations, whether it's your lending institution, family, trusted friends, anybody to help give that information, to make sure that you are preparing yourself to go successfully down that road of home ownership.
Yeah. So it's interesting. One of the things that Tammy and I have been talking about is just financial literacy for our students and for our parents. And financial literacy is something that we all need. Every person that lives in America, probably every person that lives, needs financial literacy, but it's one of the things that we don't necessarily do a lot of teaching in school. So that's something that we're thinking about. And then the idea of just home ownership, right? And making sure that people understand that. So I'm going to bounce back to kind of what James said. So he mentioned 32,000 units short in terms of affordable housing. Dion, I know you work in this space. You do a lot of stuff there. One, can you tell us a little bit more about what you do, and then what you're seeing in that space, and then some of the solutions that you bring?
Oh, I got a little bit of static on you. Can I tell you, can you just repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. One was, can you tell us a little bit more about what you do in your organization, and then some of the solutions that you can bring forward there?
Sure. So Laurel Street is a mixed income housing developer, and I'm actually very intentional in using that description because what I'm trying to call out to our community is that our model for developing affordable housing today is not the same model that we all grew up accustomed to. So many people, when you say affordable housing, that label comes with a stigma, especially in the Charlotte community, but I would say across the country, where people perceive that when you describe affordable housing, you're effectively describing public housing. Or if I use the slang, that terms that we all grew up with, we all called it the projects as we grew up. The reality is the federal government created a public housing program decades ago where they created communities where low-income families could live. Most of those communities were actually well-designed, well built for the time, and lived as healthy communities at one point in time. But the federal government has underfunded the public housing system for decades. And so similar to the house that you and I live in, you cannot build a house and do nothing to do less than is required, let me say it better, to maintain it for decades and think that that same house is going to live well 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years into the future. So the model today for affordable housing, which is what we do, is really a mixed income model where we're creating communities where families of varying income levels can live in one community and have housing, quality housing, that is affordable to them at that income level. So Laurel Street specifically develops mixed income housing. We happen to have a portfolio that is all rental housing, but I acknowledge fully that the solution around housing affordability includes a multifamily or rental model, and it also includes a home ownership model. Each of us, Laurel Street, CMHP, or the Housing Partnership, and Habitat for Humanity, we all play in a different lane. We all have a different role to play. And frankly, there's probably more work that needs to be done in Charlotte than any of us could ever do. Right. So to put it in context, Laurel Street is probably one of the most productive affordable housing developers in the state. We have done more 4% tax credit deals in the state of North Carolina than anybody has in this state in the last 10 years. We have historically produced 400 to 500 new units a year. We are growing. I'm trying very hard to get our capacity up to 1,000 units a year, but it's a drop in the bucket. The other thing I will call out, so we have our piece, but I'm acknowledging 500 or 1,000 units relative to a current 32,000 unit deficit that gets bigger every year. Because we are losing more units that are affordable than we are delivering into the market. So the issue is getting worse, and it will continue to get worse as long as Charlotte is growing at the rate that it's growing. Having said that, I also want to call out, while we're doing all the right things in terms of raising more capital, supporting the affordable housing bond, supporting a private sector capital raise, et cetera, we have, and you're talking about tens of millions of dollars. I like to tell people you need to add a zero, a couple of zeros. We have $1 billion problem in the city.
Wow.
Right? If you do the math of what it would cost the city of Charlotte to build 32,000 units, it is not a tens of millions of dollar problem. It's $1 billion plus.
Wow.
So having said that, I don't mean to be the depressing voice, right?
Yeah.
It feels insurmountable. But the flip side of it is every household we serve is a family that will obtain housing that is affordable to them, which is something that each of us deserves. Everybody on this call lives in housing, myself included, that we can afford. We live in affordable housing. It's affordable to us.
Right.
So the school teacher needs affordable to her, housing to him or her. The person, the barista at the Starbucks, the person who cleans the hotel room in a city that's building hotel rooms so that it can be a stimulus for economic development and we can have conventions and we can support new corporate growth. Where do they live? And so what we are trying to do is provide solutions so that households of all income levels can find housing that is affordable to that household. Laurel Street in particular develops multifamily housing for mixed income households, but every development we do will always provide housing that serves households at the median income or below. Not necessarily exclusively, because again, it's a mixed income model. We may have some market units and we may have some 30% of the median income units, and we'll mix those income levels in every community based on what makes sense for that neighborhood, what makes sense for the market in terms of our access to subsidy, and what makes sense for that particular development.
Okay, so that was amazing, Aaron. I'm gonna ask you, and then Laura, I'm gonna come back to you. But Dion, one thing I want to try to simplify in that answer, because it's an amazing answer. So can you talked about the median income level. So can you explain that in Charlotte? And then you talked about below that and above that. So just so we're all on the same page.
Sure. So generally speaking, the median income level, I'm going to quote it off the top of my head. Somebody might know it better. I'm going to call it about $74,000 for a household of four. Did I get that right, colleagues?
We got thumbs up. We got thumbs up around the board. Yes. So 74,000 median income level is about 74. There is plenty of people that I know do not make that. So that's amazing. That's median.
Correct. Each of us, if you really think about the companies and the organizations that we work in, no matter where you work, my company included, has employees that makes less than that for their household. And so that is the median income in Charlotte. And so what we are trying to target is really realistically, and then people say that generally speaking, we should all be spending about 30% of our income for rent and utilities. Right? So if you do that math, right, and I haven't done it in front of me, somebody else might be able to call it off the top of your head. I know that an 80% AMI household, which is 80% of that, can afford generally $1,200 a month for a one bedroom or $1,650 for a two bedroom. A three bedroom, excuse me, a three bedroom. And so, but those numbers sound big, but the reality is when you look at the housing production in the city of Charlotte, it's nowhere close.
Yeah.
Rents in Uptown for a one bedroom are probably pushing $2,000 a month per unit for a 1-bedroom.
Wow. That's amazing.
And
Aaron,
exceed that as you go up in bedroom size.
yeah.
Jamie can speak to the home ownership market, but realistically, if you went on MLS, how hard is it to find a house that sells for less than $200,000 a sales price? That is a very insurmountable task. I have a close example, a close friend who's a Charlotte school teacher. She's in her late 20s. She went on the market to try to buy a house. She qualified for less than $200,000. She got outbid on the first 2 or 3 offers she made. She had to make an on-the-spot offer to buy that house, and she closed about a month ago. But it is very difficult because the supply at that price point for median income and below in the Charlotte market is very small.
Wow, amazing. Aaron, would you jump in?
Well, you know, I was just listening to everything that Dion said, and she is right on point about the inventory that's needing, the difficulty in making a purchase, the difficulty in even finding a reasonable rent. And all of those things are important and necessary for us to focus on. But the other piece that I consider is just as important is the outreach and education to our community to let them know what's accessible to them. What we were just talking about now about AMIs and only 30% of your income going to your rent and utilities or your mortgage and utilities, those are pieces that our community is oftentimes missing to say, okay, this is how I need to prepare my finances in order to rent or buy. And so at the Housing Partnership, we're very focused on the financial empowerment model. We're focused on the education piece, but also the money mindset. A lot of times within the Black community, we will not know how to spend our money correctly, or will prioritize spending in places where it's maybe not necessary. And so a powerful conversation around the money mindset is extremely important. So now that you've got your rental place, you've got your home, what do you do with it, right? How do you maintain it? How do you ensure, to Dion's point, that 10, 20 years from now, your home is not dilapidated or a target, right? These are all pieces of education that are important. And you have to take ownership of it, which is why I love the Habitat model, because you take ownership of the home that you're about to receive, the home that you've earned. I was also listening to that unit count, right? That 32,000 units that Councilman Mitchell mentioned. And one thing we all know is we cannot build ourselves out of this. It is insurmountable, to her point. And so we do have to begin thinking creatively about our inventory. You know, what would it look like to have the single room occupancy model? What would it look like to have the detached home model where people can build on lots? You know, that's all like zoning conversation. So I think that we have to, going forward, consider what we've done in the past is not necessarily always going to work, and how can we creatively and effectively increase the amount of units that we have in a non-traditional way.
Right, because Laura, I can't imagine at Habitat,
wow.
What do y'all do with that? I mean, with the shortage, how are y'all, what's going on with that, with the Habitat and you helping with this shortage?
Yeah. So, you know, that 32,000 unit shortage is staggering, and we all run the risk that we just get overwhelmed by it. But I think for every family that we can build for, you know, we're providing, you know, safe and affordable housing for that family. So what Habitat Charlotte Region is doing this year, we'll probably work towards 60 to 70 families will become new homeowners, either through new construction that we're doing or through the acquisition program that we have, where we're acquiring existing units in the city, rehabbing them, and then reselling them to Habitat families. So that combination of new units and rehabbing existing units. The other thing that we're doing that I think is really important, and Dion touched on this a little bit, is that the shortage, we're at risk of it getting worse because of the loss of inventory of existing homes. So a term you might hear is NOAHs, which is naturally occurring affordable housing that was built, you know, years ago, neighborhood housing that over time has become more due to age of an affordable inventory. So what we're trying to do is preserve housing so that we don't lose that inventory. If we build new housing and we lose the old, where it's kind of one step forward, two steps back. So we've got to do a both and strategy of building new and preserving. And so this year we'll preserve 126 homes where our owner occupied homes that will go in partnership with the city and the county. We go in mostly for seniors that have deferred maintenance, that they're on fixed income, they can't maintain their homes. And we know there's just not enough senior housing available. If they cannot stay in their home, there's not places for them to go. And so we want to rehab their homes, keep them in their homes, allow them to age in place. They're anchors in their neighborhoods. They've been there a long time. It's good for the health of the neighborhood. It's good for their mental health to stay in their home. And so we're doing both kind of the building new and the preserving and repairing of the aging homes.
Yeah. Is that, you said you was going to be doing 60 to 70 new family homes. Is that average for Habitat, or is that more this year, or how? I'm sure
that,
COVID probably paid a.
Yeah. So, we've got a health crisis and in the middle of a pandemic, and we are still really trying to focus on how to serve more families and how to grow. So we're leaning hard into that. And so Habitat Charlotte Region recently went through a merger to allow us to be able to do more intentionally across Mecklenburg County and Iredell County. And so that is, we're growing our impact in both new construction and this rehabilitation program. It's actually a pilot program that we're doing with the city of Charlotte.
And can I add, Tammy and John, just to support Laura, the city of Charlotte is putting $4.2 million for NOAA. To Laura's point, making sure we can preserve that stock.
Wow. So it was a great question in the chat. I just saw roll past there. So that $32,000 or 32,000 units shortage. The person asked, like, where are those people now? Are they homeless? Like, if they're not in that 32, where are they?
One of our questions.
Yeah.
Where do they go?
So I'm gonna take the first stab. I want Laura and Aaron and Dion then to back me up. So we see them probably in two categories. One is they're in hotels, and that is, to me, very depressing. That you and I know that a good quality of family cannot stay in a 1-bedroom hotel where they got to study, sleep, and eat. That's number one. Number two, you do find them in our homeless shelter. And becomes very challenging when you have to separate the families. And so those where we see the city, we see that most of them are. And let me put, John, to your point, and so everyone can understand, we need to provide units that the average rent is $324. So you heard what Dion said earlier, downtown, a 1-bedroom is $2,000 a month. So I want everyone to know how challenging this problem. We're going to overcome this problem, but how challenging it is. So we'll ask Housing Partnership, we'll ask Dion, and we'll ask Laura, for 30% AMI, we need you to build affordable housing units that will only rent for $324. So I just want people to know what we're talking about rent, and then have my providers to chime in about the difficulty to get to that price point.
So I want to chime in and speak to where people are coming from. This pandemic has really shown some of the, just a lot of the disparities that we have within our city. And the Housing Partnership is running the rent and mortgage relief program. And we're talking to customers. We've had since April over 6,000 people apply for rent and mortgage relief. And within that program, we talked more about where they're coming from, why they're there. And we also provide hotel relief. And to Councilman's point, the number of people that are living in hotels is absolutely staggering. And they feel that there is no way out, that the hotel prices are gouging them, and they can't even have enough money for deposit assistance, right, to be able to get into an apartment or think about a home at some point in time. We're also seeing a lot of people who are doing one-off private rentals that are not on the books necessarily. They're just trying to find a space and place to be. And unfortunately, that ends up being someone who is homeless and couch surfing. And so when we think about availability for those units, we're looking for to give people stability, get them off their friend's couch or outside of that these landlords that will take advantage of them just because they need a place to stay, and get them into a rental or any other stable situation. So I just wanted to speak to that because we're seeing more and more of it as we listen to their stories.
And some of the people in need actually have housing. Let's be clear. It's not everyone's living in a hotel or is literally homeless. They are rent overburdened. They're paying 50 and 60 and 70% of what they make to pay rent, which is not sustainable.
Right.
And that means that they're probably making a difficult trade-off between rent and other household needs, whether that's medication, whether that's food, whether that's, other things that the family needs. And what we're trying to do is provide housing that we deem affordable, again, in that 30% of their income range. And that's how Councilmember Mitchell gets to the $324. If a household that is at 30% of the median income, so they make 30% of the $74,000, is paying 30% of their income for rent, they can only afford $324.
Wow.
And the only way we can serve that population, which is the biggest need, the lower end of the spectrum of the income spectrum is the biggest need in the city of Charlotte. The only way we can serve that population with quality housing in the city is through subsidies. And there are HUD subsidies that the Housing Authority manages that can be Section 8 vouchers, et cetera. But there are also capital subsidies that we get through federal programs like the federal tax credit program, or local subsidies like the Charlotte Housing Trust Fund that actually help us subsidize the cost to build the unit so that we can rent the unit for less than would typically be charged at market rate.
Yeah. So we got about 8 minutes left. So I'm gonna switch subjects really quick and then probably hit a speed round here. So home ownership. So we talked a lot about rental, and home ownership is, again, near and dear to my heart because I think all of us would love to see more people in home, more people that can afford them in homes.
That is the American dream.
That is the American dream.
That's it. Yeah.
But obviously we're falling really short on the American dream. So as we were doing our research, and I just want to throw this one out, this was an interesting one. So according to research from the Urban Institute, home ownership for white high school dropouts is higher than home ownership for college-educated Blacks.
Yeah, that literally
blew my mind.
Our mind.
I'm going to go to Jamie because we haven't heard you in a second. Talk about, from the lending perspective, what are you guys doing to increase home ownership, especially for Blacks? And anything in specific there, and then I'll circle back around on a couple others.
Perfect. I think the best thing we're doing with my credit union is adding different programs and availability to help reach out and cover other areas that are needing some assistance. We have also currently a portfolio product we created for the I-10 program. So for members that are non-citizens, so we are identifying some specialty programs. And I think that is what's going to be key to helping to promote homeownership in other demographics or groups across the board. We need to level the field. We need to make it fair across the field for everybody from whatever start we've had to have the correct education and backing and availability to programs. So I think expanding programs, we have one right now I'm really happy with from Freddie Mac. It is based on your median income for areas. So it is promoting homeownership at a less down payment to lessen how much is normally required, and going by income-based areas in how they can approve certain loans in areas to encourage homeownership, and especially rental areas. So I think that's a great program, but making sure to have the availability for every borrower from everyone you see in every walk of life. That's going to be the best thing to help. And again, to level that playing field. So we're all starting from the same place and allowing the same opportunities to present themselves across the board.
Yeah, I'm gonna hit a yeah.
Oh yeah,
Can
one more
somebody
thing.
speak to House Charlotte while you're there?
Go ahead, Dan.
Can somebody share the House Charlotte program? I'm not the right person, but
Yes.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead, Aaron.
Go ahead.
We
Go ahead,
we
Councilman.
give you the money. Go ahead, Aaron.
So we have a partnership with the city of Charlotte that we're very thankful for. It's a down payment assistance program, and it is called House Charlotte. And we also have the Community Heroes program through the city of Charlotte. So I'll talk about those two very briefly because I know we're short on time. So we think that a way to help get families that are at that 80% up to 110% area median income is through down payment assistance. And the city of Charlotte made a commitment to be able to administer that to as many people as possible within a calendar year. What we know is that you can have access to down payment assistance up to $17,000 for a new construction home up to $300,000. And so what this does is it eliminates that big lump sum that people have to have in the very beginning, or at least helps with that big lump sum to be able to get them into the home. What's even better is that the city of Charlotte last year in November created a partnership to create a program called the Community Heroes program. And that's geared towards our people who are on the front lines, our service workers, the firemen, the teachers, to be able to receive up to $30,000 in down payment assistance, and your AMI can go up to 120%, and the home can be up to $300,000. And when you think about being able to have access to those funds, it can really help you move further along in the home ownership process. One more piece that I'll talk about, while it's not connected to the city of Charlotte, is our CDFI fund that we have. So we're a community development financial institution, and we have a fund specifically for our Hispanic community to receive down payment assistance, up to $15,000 if you're at the 80% AMI and below. And we're very excited about making that designation just for the Hispanic Latino community because they are just as underserved as our Black community, and we need to make sure that we have lending opportunities for them as well.
Right. Well, we really, really thank you, our panelists.
You guys are
thank
awesome.
you for all the positivity at the end of that on the
Awesome.
things that are being done to help with the crisis and also with helping with Black home ownership.
Yeah.
We do want to turn to our update on the call to action. For the sake of time, we will go ahead and just let you know that we are at 39% on our call to action. You will see the slide that pop up. So we are working towards that 2020 goal that we have.
Yes.
Also, the next call to action is we want everyone to share that Brooklyn link that we showed at the beginning of the segment, and share it. It's on our social media. You'll see the link there. Please like it and share it with others so they are more educated on what it's like with as far as redlining and getting more education about the housing disparity. Other than that, John, I know we was only going to skim the surface of this because we knew it was so deep.
Yeah, as we start to get into these, we are like, we could take 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks, and we can literally talk about housing forever. I think the thing that's really interesting is it's all connected.
Yes.
You know, when we talked about
the employment.
Yeah, we talked about employment. You talk about Blacks making less money, not being able to increase as much. And then now you start talking about housing, and we're going to talk about education.
Right.
All of these things wrap in together. And
right, because even yesterday when we were doing research on it, we're thinking about our young leaders, and we're thinking, well, we want them to come back home. You know, we want, and even our corporate partners, they want diverse talent. So we're trying to marry the two. But when we think about, especially what Dion mentioned, the median income, if they go to school and come out of school and be teachers or police officers or whatever, they may not make that income. Where do they live? Because they don't want to live with their parents. We all know that. So we were actually concerned about that because we do want to see Charlotte be in a better position. And because we are like an economic powerhouse to the world because of the banking industry. So that's one thing that, like we said, we could go on forever
and ever and ever.
Forever.
I want to personally thank the panelists. You guys are amazing.
Thank you.
Came through with just so much information. I mean, it's just, like I said, it's a forever thing. I also want to thank DHG. They are our partners in this work. They've done amazing work. They do all the heavy lifting. We have our man Eric on the background back there, just doing great work and keeping us on time.
Yeah.
But we're going to wrap this up. So if you missed any of our segments,
Yeah.
you can go to our website
Mhm.
and then see the segments on our website. So Eric, if you put up the last slide, you'll see the links for our website. We hope that you guys have an amazing day.
Right. And our next one will be in 2 weeks because we're skipping a week. And the next one will be criminal justice.
Ooh.
So we'll be talking about another one that we know that we will be skimming the surface on that, but at least just to bring some awareness. And that next segment will be September the 22nd.
So you guys have a wonderful day.
Yes.
Thank you all for joining us. Again, if you missed it, view it on our website. Also, do the call to action. Go to our Facebook page. You'll see the link on the screen. It was on the screen earlier. Go to our Facebook page, go to that, and then share it with your friends. Everyone should see that video.
Yes.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great day.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Tammy. Thank you, John.
Yes.